The talk of the town today, of course, is a lot of small companies are winding up, and they all state the same thing, which is rents are crazy.
It's a perfect storm of rising costs, of which rental is a huge part of it, but also reduced spending. So that's what led to the record number of F&B closures that we have seen as reported from the 2024 ACRA business closure numbers. And as far as we can tell, 2025 is looking the same. Rent control, based on everything that we've seen and read about, has not really proven to work in Singapore or in other countries. But what will help immediately for the situation and the issues that we see today is to look at, after the first term of lease, is there a reasonable way to ensure that the rental doesn't hike up by 30, 40, 50% or double? And we think that that is unreasonable. Let's say if inflation is about 3% or GDP is about 3%, then we're thinking that a rental renewal cap that's based on increase by 3% is a fair shake for both landlords and tenants.
Welcome back to the TFC Business Show. I'm your host, Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and today we have an interesting topic. Okay, I think it's interesting. I know every episode I also say interesting, but this topic is right up the alley of the day. A lot of people are talking about this whole small businesses are not keeping up, it's very tough, business is closing and all that stuff, right? So we've done an episode previously with Flo, and I think that did very, very well. But besides all the anger, I wanted to move the conversation further to see how we can then, as small, medium enterprises, be smarter with our leasing arrangement, be better tenants. We want to be smarter in this so that we can succeed and thrive. So I'm very excited to be in studio with Terence from SGTuff.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, when I first heard of SGTuff, right, I think was MP Low Yen Ling, I think. Right, she was the one that in one of the speeches at SGTuff, then I was like, SGTuff is some more, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what is this? And it's only recently as I go along and try to read up and try to figure out what can we put into the conversation that values add the conversation of the day, which is this whole small media enterprises are struggling, that I found SGTuff, right? So you are one of the founders of SGTuff. Maybe you can kind of walk us through for our audience to get to know you a little bit better, and how did this whole SGTuff this came about?
We started out very organically at the height of COVID in 2020. It started out as a WhatsApp group, informal WhatsApp group of micro SME business owners who were mainly with tenancies. So whether you have a F&B shop or retail shop or retail services shop, all small guys, we were all kind of panicking in early 2020 because of the impending COVID, right? It was upon us already. Government in Singapore and around the world were starting to impose restrictions. And apart from worry, actually, I don't even think we were worried about our own health. We were just worried that
about the business.
About the business more.
Such a tauke problem.
Right? That's because you're going to have all sorts of movement restrictions, and we were going to be stuck with much lower revenues, but costs will continue to be a burden. Rentals were not going to go down. We were not thinking about firing or letting go of our staff, not immediately anyway, because we're all small businesses and we all depend on those few staff that are really important for us, right? So we were really panicking, and we got together on WhatsApp. I joined very early on when there were 30 of us on the WhatsApp group, all complaining but not knowing what to do. And within 2 weeks, 30 grew to 500, and within another 2 weeks, 500 grew to 1,000, right? So very quickly, there was 1,000 of us. In Singapore, that's a big number,
Yeah.
right? and it busted the WhatsApp
Oh, the max cap. Oh my
chat
God.
group limit
Okay.
at the time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we moved to Telegram because Telegram allowed for more people. So we got together then, and I spent a couple of weeks watching the chat, just going crazy, complaining, worrying, and kind of headed nowhere. And that's when I tried to put our thoughts, our collective thoughts together, and I tried to put down, okay, look, I think these are the key issues. And once that was summarized, everybody collectively say, oh yes, thanks, that makes sense. And that's when the conversations started in earnest with government, with landlords, and with other stakeholders to really talk about, okay, we've got all this whole sector of frontline businesses in trouble. What are the few things that you need? Then it led to things like the rental relief schemes, the job support schemes, and all the other relief measures for many businesses, but especially for frontline businesses that were most affected by COVID. So that's how we started. We then formalized ourselves post-COVID into a cooperative movement. So now, SGTuff, Singapore Tenants, United for Fairness, is a legit cooperative entity comprising businesses, mostly small micro businesses in F&B, in retail, and in retail services.
Great. And what is a cooperative? Give us a little bit of a context, right? It's not every day we hear this word, and like in the structure of SGTuff, how does that work?
And I'm glad you asked it because we took a while to decide who are we. And as small business owners, we kind of, don't like too much bureaucracy and formal structure, but at the same time, we knew we had to formalize. So instead of choosing the path of being a typical society or association, which has its pros and cons and certain restrictions. For example, I believe societies are considered non-profits. And so in many ways are constricted from earning revenue. But then it didn't make sense for us to be a private limited either because we're not exactly here to make money.
There's no equity upside in this, right?
That's not what we started this for,
yeah.
right? And then we discovered this great balance entity called cooperative, which balanced very well. It's a bit like social enterprise, which balanced and allow us to have revenue generation abilities, but done in a way that took care of collective or community interests. So that's how, in the end, we chose the pathway of cooperative, and it's worked out for us since then.
Okay, great. And I stand corrected. I think it's MP Low Yen Ling. I don't know exactly. Is she like a big spokesperson for you guys?
Yes. Now, Minister of State Low Yen Ling, she's been a big part of our journey. She's part of MTI, and she's actively engaged with us and other trade associations for the issues of our sectors, yes.
Okay, great. That's good. Before we move further into the discussion, I also want to allow our audience to get to know your business a little bit better, right? So like, I think you run an outfit at Marina, Mandarin Oriental, that space, right? Or...
No, at 39, I left corporate world. Started out then my own business in retail. So I'm in a retail space. It was a bad struggle for the first 2 years. I thought, I was overconfident. I came from a good corporate experience, and I thought I knew it all. And my business faced pretty much failure within the first 2 years. But then we were lucky enough to find good brands. So I'm in the space of selling footwear today. We found a great footwear brand, and then no looking back after that. We managed to grow a healthy, thriving business. All the way until COVID. And then the world changed.
Yeah, and then the story began. The talk of the town today, of course, is a lot of small companies are winding up, right? Whether is it Floor, I think there was another brand that 80 over years.
Castle.
Yeah. So, so more and more of these brands are closing, and they all state the same thing, which is rents are crazy. Of course, there are other business inputs that have gone up, whether is it manpower, whether is it, inputs from your costing level, so everything has moved up. But rents have moved up is a real thing. I do believe so. So maybe for a start, before we talk about how to be a smarter tenant, what is your read on the situation with this tenancy, situation?
Actually, this issue has been brewing intensively, I would say, for more than 12 months. We have been sensing it for a while. It doesn't come as a big shock to us, knowing that, as you put it, it's a perfect storm of factors that are hitting the F&B in particular, but also retail and services industries as well. It's a perfect storm of rising costs, of which rental is a huge part of it, but also reduced spending by both locals and tourists. So when you have revenue downward pressure and upward pressure on costs come together in a significant way at the same time over a sustained period. So that's what led to the record number of F&B closures that we have seen as reported from the 2024 ACRA business closure numbers. And as far as we can tell, 2025 is looking the same type of pace of closure, as we can also see from the many press and media and online reports that continue to come up every other day, literally. So we think the situation is coming to a head. Is it affecting every business out there? I would say yes, to a smaller or larger extent, it's affecting everyone. It affects most the smaller businesses because we are the weakest in terms of our depth of financial strength. And that is where you start to see, I would say, that 10, 20, 30% who are struggling, who may have been borderline or positive or borderline negative already. And with that sustained pressure, they start to find it unfeasible to carry on, right? And we're not talking about businesses that have been struggling badly for a long time. I think there is a misunderstanding that we might be saying that, all businesses need to be saved or deserve to survive. We come from the F&B and retail sector. We are actually very used to a very high turnover rate, churn. This churn also leads to, I would say, variety and vibrancy, right? But what we are seeing today are many established businesses that have been around for many, many years and viable for many, many years, suddenly become overnight unviable. And that's because of a drastic rental hike for their rental renewals. So when we see a lot of that happening well beyond the normal churn rate, then we think that there are some big systemic issues, of which high or unreasonably high rental renewal increases seem to be a big part of what's happening today.
Okay, fair. So then what's the SGTuff position on this? What do you hope to see a healthy rental market in that sense?
If we go into kind of basic economics 101, demand and supply, or you have to go to demand and supply first, right? When prices are very high, it's typically because demand is very high, supply is low, or some combination of that, right? So instinctively, we think that when prices become very high, it's always because there is either or both of high demand and low supply. So we think that that's one of the big contributing factors to why rentals are increasing. Okay, it's demand and supply. But that goes into the big topic of urban planning, space planning, pretty complex. We are trying to work with the government and relevant agencies like URA to dive deeper into that whole area, right? It goes into urban planning as well. So demand and supply is one of the root causes. That will take time to determine what are the real issues and what are the real long-term fixes. For the more immediate term, we are thinking of a few more short to mid-term measures that will provide fair relief and fair, I think, equilibrium to both tenants, landlords, and most important, the consumers, right? The customers. That's
Because
what
the
we're here
price
for.
always end up with us.
Correct. Correct.
Always push through one. Yeah. it's part of the cost, right? That's just how things work, right? Price, consumers are price sensitive, so, but that being said, prices do affect us. So sometimes I find it very weird when there's a narrative out there saying, oh, rental price won't affect the consumer
no,
prices. What
no,
rubbish is
not at
that,
all.
right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because for business owners, when your costs are too high, you have to price up in order to just to survive. Not to make big bucks,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
just to survive.
The structural reality. Yeah.
So for the more short to midterm measures, one of the big ideas that we have is the idea of rental renewal caps. Now, this is very different from rent control. I think there's also a bit of maybe confusion or misunderstanding amongst the public or stakeholders that organizations like us are advocating for rent control. To be clear, we're not. Rent control, based on everything that we've seen and read about, has not really proven to work in Singapore or in other countries. So our position is that the initial rent, the starting rent, should continue to be subject to market forces, demand and supply. Like I said, we will look at separately on a longer term basis. But what will help immediately for the situation and the issues that we see today is to look at, after the first term of lease, is there a reasonable way to ensure that the rental doesn't hike up by 30, 40, 50% or double, which is a lot of what we're seeing today. And, you picture yourself from a small business owner point of view. Let's say you are a small F&B business. You take up your first lease. You put your, life savings, your blood, sweat, tears into that, and to build a viable business in the first 3 years, right? You're not a billionaire, but you are kind of doing okay, right? And you've sunk in your money into renovation, marketing, hiring people, and then, people resign, you got to hire more, equipment break down, you got to replace them. You put in a lot to build a viable business, just about viable business in the first 3 years. And then upon renewal, for whatever reason, we can get into those reasons, the landlord says, hey, look, I've got to charge you 50% more rent because that's what I see happening in the market. Or I've got potential new tenants who are willing to pay that. And that's what's been happening. And we think that is justifiably unreasonable, a bit unfair. And that's justifiably a case where looking at rental renewal caps that are, for example, indexed to inflation, CPI, right? Or indexed to GDP growth, could be fair. Let's say if inflation is about 3% or GDP is about 3%, then we're thinking that a rental renewal cap that's based on increase by 3% or whatever the number is a fair shake for both landlords and tenants.
Okay. But actually that's the HDB system now, right? You bid for the commercial space that HDB runs, and then after that, the renewal process is quite a kind of like steady.
It's a lot more steady, and
Yeah.
it's got a lot less shocks in the subsequent renewals. There are a few more measures. So the first measures, rental renewal, some form of indexing to a fair public measure. And by the way, measures like this have been implemented in some way, shape, or form in many other countries that we see around the world. Sweden, for example, right? Other countries in Europe or even Japan have variations of that, right? So, and it's successfully done. The second and third and fourth measures are to allow tenants in financial distress today to have an easier exit out of their existing lease. So today, many tenants in financial distress are stuck. Let's say you have 1.5 years left on your lease and you are already in trouble. If you are able to exit now without being held for the balance of your lease, that could save a lot of unnecessary pain and stress or broken businesses and broken people in the system. So that's one of the more short-term measures that we are also advocating for to provide some relief to businesses in deep distress today to be given some relief from their balance of their lease contracts. So that's number 2. Number 3 is we think that some sort of vacancy tax, lease vacancy tax, is a good measure.
I know what you're trying to do.
By the way, that's being implemented for our residential property already.
Yeah, when they sell, they can't sell. Then there's
so it prevents hoarding, profiteering from hoarding. So we see many cases where landlords are asking for very high rental, but the existing tenant is unwilling to pay for it and exits the lease, but the landlord then prefers to leave that unit vacant for 6 months, a year or more until they find a tenant who is willing to pay for that, right? So I think if we have some sort of a lease vacancy tax penalty, that will create a fairer and more equilibrium market system.
Because now the rental prices are very sticky, right? Because the landlords have holding power, especially organized landlord, right? They're holding power and they refuse to bring the price down, right? For all sorts of reasons, right? Because there's, in the next renewal of the other outlet, now they got to substantiate why we got to renew at this rate, right?
Yeah,
so
there are
there's
many reasons.
There's all sorts of reasons.
The last one is a more public and better access rental pricing data transparency, which I think is an essential element of any free market mechanism. The more information, the more transparency we have out there, the better the market works. Again, very similar to what we have on a residential market, where there is a lot of data transparency on residential prices. We are advocating the same for the rental market because it helps equip both the buyers and sellers, in this case landlords and tenants, with better information.
I think it's a great time to bring in then, like, what do you think of the REITs? Wow, I'm putting you on the... To be fair, we do talk to a lot of the REITs, right? So I can kind of understand their commercial interest. Management is hired to constantly drive DPU, right? Distribution per unit, So and a lot of retail investors are also in it, right? So there's that whole mechanics. But then at some point you start to see like, oh, maybe this drive for DPU may not be very sustainable if the tenants cannot keep up with it, Ultimately, this thing needs to find a balance that everybody can, benefit from. Right, so online, of course, there's a lot of hate for REITs. Maybe not in our corner of the internet because a lot of listeners probably own most of the REITs and people are complaining, right? And we understand the game, right? So just want to hear from a tenant standpoint, like what do you think of some of these like REITs? Yeah.
First, to be fair, a lot of the very unreasonable or high rental hikes that we see recently are not coming from REITs. I think we have to be fair. We see this issue very significantly more in the strata title shop house space today. And I think there are reasons for that. We've never viewed this as an issue of landlords versus tenant or, tenant good, landlord bad. Because tenants and landlords are like husband and wife. We have to work well together for both parties to do well in the long term. So I think the REITs understand that quite well. And the REITs do take certain longer term measures beyond DPU, like improving their assets, planning for long term, planning for a better tenant mix. So we see a lot of good in that.
Oh, the tenant mix part is interesting because a lot of you go to some of the malls or the spaces that are run by the REITs, right? The tenant mix is really thought through. Right, so when you go in, it's like,
better run malls.
Yeah, better run, right? And then you go to those strata malls, which I think lesser and lesser, but still have around. It's like whoever come everybody also come, right? So okay, I never. I know this, but for you to bring it up, okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Having said that, we do think that our rental rates across the board in Singapore, whether it's shop house or REITs or big malls, are on the high side versus the rest of the world, even versus big cities like New York, the heart of central retail Manhattan, right? So I think this is where it is not so much a landlord problem. It again goes back into demand supply, land use planning, urban planning details. How do we plan our limited resources of space? How do we plan the space itself in a way that addresses some demand and supply issue that allows landlords then to still do well, but doesn't need to charge that kind of rentals that are unsustainable for many small businesses.
Fair. Yeah. I know what you mean. And it probably doesn't help that there's a lot of inflow to the Sing dollar now, right? Because the US dollar has been so-called downgraded by Moody's, our neighbors upstairs. Yeah, if you didn't know, they're upstairs. They're upstairs. All right, I think we're getting there on the show, so stay tuned. And there's been a lot of inflow into the Sing dollar. So I think if we don't kind of re-look at some of these commercial strata arrangements, this money will find their way into more and more of these things, and then
there's a lot of foreign investor money coming in as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So that again props up the demand.
Yeah. I think Heidi brought it up and many others have brought it up. It's like once you have a big tenant, a big landlord buys it over, they remortgage at a higher rate. They have to pass the mortgage to you, right? So then the cycle
It doesn't even have to be that. That is true, but let's say you are a long-time landlord in that area, and a few of the other shop houses have changed hands at a much higher rate, and you see that your new landlords who bought at a higher price have managed to secure 50% more rent. You're going to want to get the kind of rental as well, because otherwise, that's not very smart of you as a landlord, right? But then the poor tenant then suffers because of that market force, right? So, landlords are behaving as they would. So I think that we're not calling out that this is a case of landlords being evil, but we are calling out more of there are some, I think, intervening measures that can be done together with the government to make the market, I would say, fairer, work better, and be more efficient.
I know what you mean. Yes. And I think the vacancy tax will be a very interesting mechanism, right? Of course, with supply chain management of space, I think HDB has been stepping up to build more commercial space, which is great because for a long time they don't, right? Yeah. So now that they are back in the game, I think that's helpful. And then hopefully the vacancy tax, I think will definitely change the market. So we'll see how that comes along. But before all those things come along, right? We have aspiring tenants, that are trying to enter the game. I also want to give some airtime to talk about best practices for tenants, right? So today you're a new tenant, you have not been in this game before. Can you lay out some guidelines for us, how to go about being a smart tenant?
One of the biggest problematic mind frames for new startup entrepreneurs is over-optimism and overconfidence. Most business owners, when they're starting up their first business, are very excited. So was I, naturally so.
Yeah, so was I.
Very human, right? Very human.
Now not human anymore. Very jialat already, then you learn, right? Yeah. Then you'll be like, okay, this one cannot. But yes, please continue.
So I would say an easy rule of thumb would be to think, can your business work? The sales was half of what you're projecting. Then the secondary question would be, okay, in case it is, and you still want to get on with it, how badly does this damage you? Does this knock you out forever? Or do you still have another, 5 bullets in the chamber to fire off? So first advice is reduce your projections by half and increase your cost by, not half, but increase your cost more than what you think it is, because there's a lot of hidden costs. And don't put it all in one shot and live or die by that one shot. So I think that's the first one. The second one I would say is consider what are the barriers of entry to whatever you're doing, whether you're bringing in a new product or creating a new croissant or creating a new chicken rice.
I love how croissant is your example. Because there are many new croissants.
Macaron, right?
The margins are there.
Yeah, right. But consider the barriers of entry and how easy it is for someone to come in to replicate or take your idea if you happen to succeed very well. Because I think that
But don't you think that's a phase 2 of the business?
that's the problem. Phase 2 comes very fast once you succeed. Very, very fast.
Okay.
If you don't think about it early enough, you would not have time to respond because you're too busy with your phase 1 and trying to grow it. You're not preparing for phase 2. And in fact, you would not have prepared for phase 2. You'll be very, very vulnerable and you wouldn't have the time to prepare.
Okay, I know what you mean. Because when I first started a podcast, it was just me. Like the industry is only that small. When CNA Straits Times, everybody decided, okay, we do podcasts. Suddenly, everybody had 5 shows, and the landscape just changed
and that's
in
a
a
great
moment.
point,
Yeah.
right? Competition might not just come from another small startup.
Yeah, it's the giants.
It can come from the big boys
Yeah,
with far greater financial
They have
muscle.
deep pockets, right? Immediately, they hire 5 people on their team,
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so you must kind of consider phase 2 also for the start. Okay, fair. Can you elaborate a little bit on the hidden cost side of things for new tenants? Because I also realized a lot of hidden costs after I shift into the bigger buildings. I was like, this one also need to sign a form. Lawyer also I pay. There's a lot of these things. So walk us through what are all these hidden costs here.
Just even on signing a lease alone, right? I think most people would not be aware of the many hidden costs that come together with getting a new tenancy lease in a mall or shop house. Not just legal fees, but utility bills, all sorts of admin fees, cleaning fees, air conducting fees, right? So when you're taking up a tenancy lease, whether in a shop house or in a mall, I think you've got to be very aware that in your financial provisions or budgeting, you're not just budgeting for the rental, you're also budgeting for utility fees for a coffee shop can be really a big part of your cost, right? If equipment breaks down, licensing fees, all sorts of safeties, there's so much. Now, the best example I would give is my naiveness. I really thought, okay, rent a space, just pay the rent now. But then one of the spaces I rent was going through pre-TOP exercise. It's a bit technical. It was an existing mall already, but the mall was going through big refurbishment, which I'm taking a space off, right? And I thought that tenancy in that situation simply means you agree on the rental, you pay a rental price and you're done. But no, we had to go through because it was going through this thing called pre-TOP. As the first tenant in there, we had to take on the liability and financial burden of creating all sorts of architectural engineering plans that need to be submitted to qualified architects and engineers and BCA. We didn't see that coming at all.
That is very expensive.
And that's very expensive.
Very expensive. Yeah. How much do you spend?
I would say it's in the 5-digit.
Yeah.
Easily. Just on fees. And not to mention the time and the headache associated with that, right? So these are just some of the few examples of hidden costs. I mean, the very big one is manpower, right? As small businesses, you always assume that, okay, look, you're going to hire people at a certain price. But 2 things happen. Number one is that sometimes the people that you like will cost a lot more than you budgeted for.
I don't think it's sometimes. I think it's all the time.
And very often also, small businesses, startups, you tend to get a much higher turnover, right? So along with that, also associated costs of turnover and manpower costs to deal with the fact that, your staff is turning over.
Okay, fair. So, but are there any legal details that, when you look through a tenancy agreement as a first timer that, you want people to kind of be aware of?
Look through your tenancy lease, word for word, read it through at least 2 times and understand everything fully. Till today, I think, and look, I've done that, which is that we just assume that, it's a standard tenancy lease, you just do a quick scan through and you just sign it, right? I think that's a big mistake. When you're committing to something as big as a tenancy over a duration of time, many business owners simply do not want to or do not like to read 30, 50, 70-page lease agreement. But we have also found that because of them not doing that, a lot of business owners, when they get into disputes with the landlords, realize that, had they read the tenancy lease before they signed it, they could have avoided a lot of the nightmare and
Are there
financial
some
stress.
examples? Like what are commonly present in these type of very thick tenancy agreement that you should look out for and then, renegotiate with the landlord? Because a lot of these things can all be negotiated.
A lot can, many can't, right? But at least you know, and at least you're prepared for it. I think one very simple example would be, what are the conditions for reinstatement when you leave the tenancy? I think the conditions of reinstatement can vary significantly between landlord to landlord and can make a very big difference to how much pain and cost you have to incur as a tenant when you exit the lease. And this is an area that I find many business owners do not know or go into detail of when they first sign up on, because they're not thinking of exiting. So that's just one example of a few, but that's a good example where if you had known, you could have negotiated, or at least you know what to prepare for.
Okay, fair. And are there certain very common disputes, between tenants and landlord that you want to kind of like bring up so that tenants are more aware? Because I think the other time Heidi was talking a little bit about how their opening hours, have a very strict restrictions. Like if you don't open, it's not okay, especially in the bigger malls, right? So are there certain other things
that's one.
you want to
You're right.
highlight?
So opening hours today, when consumer shopping habits have changed and manpower availability and costs are very high, that, if a mall insists or expect their tenants to be open from, let's say, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., that's 12 hours, right? 12-hour shift requires you to have at least 2 staff because, you can't have just 1 staff covering full 12 hours. And that leads to very significant manpower cost increase and can make the difference between whether a business is viable or not. And, in Singapore at least, most malls are pretty empty, between 10 to 12 and from 8 to 10.
It's very interesting, right? Malls are empty from 8 to 10. Yeah, times have changed.
Times have changed,
Yeah.
right? So if instead of requiring tenant to be staffed from 10 to 10, there could be some compromise and understanding from mall owners to say, as long as you open from 12 to 8, a full 8-hour shift, that can make a huge difference to many tenants because then they can just use 1 staff.
Yeah. Is that a negotiable arrangement from your understanding of the different malls?
Not very negotiable. It's a point of idea and discussion that we're having with stakeholders today. And we hope to be able to gain that understanding from landlords that, this is not just about helping us, but it's about helping your tenants survive and do well. And if your tenants do well, the malls will do well. That's one of the areas of potential disputes, apart from rentals, right? I mean, rentals, we're always trying to so-called negotiate a bargain about it.
Okay, fair. So any last things you want to share with new tenants that they should be aware of or look out upon? Or any like very common things that people will kena inside the agreements, just so they're aware, right? We're not shaming the landlords.
I think the second bit is, I think some people know that, but many new entrepreneurs in this space might not realize that in 2023, we actually managed to pass legislation on fair tenancy code of conduct, which was a breakthrough and a milestone for us. It's been something that tenants have been pushing for many years. But because of COVID, we finally managed to pass through a set of fair tenancy code of conduct that regulates that all commercial retail leases must follow and abide by to eliminate a lot of the unnecessary hidden costs that many landlords impose on tenants. So that's my first advice, to encourage new tenants and in fact many existing tenants to familiarize themselves with the Fair Tenancy Code of Conduct, which by the way, we conduct as a training course, as a 1-day training course, subsidized training course, which we are happy to offer to anyone who wants to find out more about this. I think this really
So that's
important.
the revenue generating part for SGTuff.
Yeah, we do earn some revenue by being a training provider. So this is kind of my
I give you you can pitch a bit.
So be aware of fair tenancy and how that affects you. And I would say the second one is a bit more commercial advice, which is consumer behavior and habits are changing very, very fast. We are seeing a true merger and integration between offline and online to not just look at your business from a pure online or pure offline perspective, but to look at it from a totally merged or integrated perspective. A bit harder for F&B, but not impossible. Certainly applicable for all the rest of retail, which is then it allows you to build a business model that is a lot more resilient, that is not just dependent on, let's say, a physical tenancy lease, and all your risk is on that physical tenancy.
Yeah. But ultimately, it's a business strategy, right? You got to count everything into your plans, your ideas, and I do hope that Singapore can continue to stay vibrant for smaller businesses, right? If not, then it'll be a very boring, everywhere also same brand, same franchise. I genuinely think we could have gone further into a lot of other topics. This can be a season, right?
Yeah, it can.
Yeah, let's see down the road. Maybe we can do something. But yeah, thank you for your time. If our audience enjoyed this and would like to connect with you, or connect with SGTuff, where it's a good place for them to go
just
to.
Google SGTuff. Our website will come out. We are actually a very vibrant community of business owners. We are very
in
informal.
the Telegram complaining.
We are now back to WhatsApp.
Okay, back
right?
to
We're now
WhatsApp.
back to WhatsApp. So everybody prefers WhatsApp. We've got hundreds and thousands of messages that go on. Business owners tend to be lonely bunch of people because,
Like that, who still want to do?
Right.
That's why don't do.
Right. It's a very lonely path. I'm sure you empathize with that.
I know. I feel like we can go coffee after this.
Yeah, right. But with the community, you don't feel so lonely. You feel that you have a few other 100 business owners who are going through what you're going through and who can also offer you help and advice. So this is where we, I think, very different from most other groupings. We are very informal, we're very friendly. So I encourage startups or existing business owners to find out more about us and to join us and feel that you're part of a group, feel less lonely.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you like what we are doing, head over to thefinancialcoconut.com to put your email address there so that we can reach you and route out the algorithm. If not always chase the algorithm, very shag. So we hope to see you at our next event. And meanwhile, like, share, subscribe. Thank you. We'll see you next week. And that's all for today. Bye-bye.